was sitting on a sofa looking out at the park below my house. Below me, I could see lots of kids running around playing football, all running around chasing after a ball. On my lap was my book, next to me was a cup of tea, and on the table next to me was a slice of rich, delicious chocolate pound cake that had been baked earlier in the day by my son Veer. It was moist, chocolatey, and absolutely delicious. Veer wasn't with the other children running around after the football. He was sitting in his room, intent upon a puzzle, trying to find that exact shade of blue to match the thousands of pieces of sky that he was trying to fit into the puzzle. For Veer, you see, has autism, which is a complex neurodevelopmental condition. For him to be on the football field would have been extremely torturous because he would have had to follow the rules, understand them and then follow them, interact with the other kids, trying to figure out how teamwork works, trying to tolerate the way they banged into each other and crashed into him. All this would have been extremely, extremely difficult for him. Autism is, like I said, a complex neurodevelopmental condition. It impacts how people interact with others and how they perceive the world. There's a famous saying which goes, if you've met one child with autism, you've met one child with autism. And this means that the way it presents itself in different people varies from one person to the other. Veer was diagnosed when he was a month short of 3. We couldn't quite figure out what was going on with him at that point of time. We couldn't understand why he preferred to play by himself rather than with his twin sister Gayatri. Why, when she jabbered on non-stop, he barely said 5 or 6 words, and why he seemed to exist in this world of his own, which he couldn't let any of us enter. A visit to a developmental pediatrician confirmed the diagnosis, which did answer our questions, but also broke our hearts. The months that followed were full of therapy visits, pediatricians' visits, visits to special educators, occupational therapists, speech therapists, reading up about the condition. I was drowning, and when I did come up for air, I was grieving. I grieved for the kind of son that I wanted to have. I grieved for the kind of childhood that he could have had. I grieved for the kind of mother that I could have been. And in this grieving, I lost myself. Time is a healer, and as cliched as that sounds, it's also very true. And so when things moved ahead, when time moved ahead, and I passed through the 5 stages of grief, I realized that I was now starting to view autism through a different lens. I realized that there was this word that was being used a lot at that time, and the word was normal. Therapists, doctors, educators would all talk to me about Veer's development as abnormal versus normal. And I would get very, very angry because I would wonder who they were to call my child abnormal. How dare some ignorant therapist call him abnormal? And so I realized that while they were calling him abnormal and while I was bristling every time they did, I also was viewing autism and him through this lens of abnormal. And it is then that I realized and learned my first lesson, which is that there is no such thing as normal. We are all different, and it is our differences that make us the unique, wonderful people that we all are. So that was my first lesson. I have twins, a son and a daughter, and for every time that one auntie told me that I have a perfect, complete family, if they gave me 10 rupees for it, I would be a millionaire by now. I held on to this idea of my perfect family, my son and my daughter and my husband and me, this perfect family which looked so beautiful and so perfect. And this got shattered when Veer got his diagnosis. Suddenly, I was looking at my family through a different lens because it was difficult for me to visualize how this family should look when it was not perfect. I realized then that what is really perfect? It's ironic that when I was viewing my family as imperfect, I had just 1 year previously written in my book Spiritual Parenting that we all want a perfect child, despite the fact that we ourselves are imperfect. And what happens when this child is different? So, this made me really question what is perfect, and perfect according to whom? Is perfect this perfect family lying in the sun, fully bronzed bodies on a beach somewhere, where pictures are taken and it's put on social media? Is it having kids who get all the medals and who win all the prizes and who are excellent at everything? Is it having a fantastic job which earns you millions and millions? What is really perfect? And during this time, I remember sitting with my husband and myself, were sitting on our bed one Sunday afternoon. The kids were with us and they were all playing around and they were lazy, they were giggling, and we were having such a perfect time. And I thought to myself, wow, this is so perfect. And that is when I realized that perfect is not those moments which are put on social media or those perfect looking silhouettes or anything of the sort. Perfect is all the millions and millions of memories that are stored in the feed of our mind. And that is what makes life really worth living. So that was lesson number 2. If autism has taught me anything, it is how to be extremely patient. Now, as a parent, you are taught dollops of patience. And if you add autism to the mix, it becomes so much more. So when you want to explain something to a typically developing child, you would explain it maybe once, maybe twice, and they'd get it. Put a kid on the spectrum into this mix, and you find that you have to explain it to them many, many, many more times, and you have to write it out, you have to draw it, you have to role play it, whatever it takes to explain to that child. So a typical conversation with me and Veer will be roughly like this. Here's me. Veer, we are going to go to Nani's house. We are going to play with Misty the dog. We are going to eat lunch. Then we are going to go and get your haircut. And then we are going to come home. Okay? See, Nani's house, Misty, lunch, haircut, home. Okay? Understood? Okay. Got it? Let's go. We are going to Nani's house. Yes, we are going to Nani's house. We'll play with Misty. Yes, you can play with Misty. You can play fetch with Misty. Then we'll eat lunch. Yes, Nani has made lunch for you. Your favorite things. Then where will we go for a haircut? To the same place, baby, we've been going to since you were a little baby. Then we'll come home. Yes, then we'll come home after we finish all this. Now, 5 more times before we even leave the house, we are going to have this conversation, despite me showing him this schedule and explaining it to him. And will I get tired or angry or upset or impatient? No, I won't. Invariably, I won't, because I will do whatever it takes to make sure that my child understands that and is not anxious. And that is how I have really developed the patience of Master Shifu. And the beautiful thing about this is that this patience extends into other areas of my life. So whether it is with me listening, calling somebody and having to listen to the coronavirus message which says, coronavirus की बीमारी देश भर में फैल चुकी है, घर से बाहर निकलते वक्त फेस मास्क जरूर पहने और अपने हाथ धोते रहिए. Or whether it is standing in line endlessly at Sarkari banks, waiting to get some form filled or some account redeemed, I just don't lose my patience. I have practically become a Zen monk and nothing seems to faze me. So that was lesson number 3. When Veer was growing up, I had a daydream that I used to lapse into very often. In my daydream, I used to imagine what Veer would be like if he was typically developing. I used to imagine a smart young man who would have lots of friends, who would play football, who would be great at his studies. He would have a wicked sense of humor. He would be a handsome, rakish young man. He would love and tease Gayatri in equal measure. And he would come flooding into the house with all his friends, slyly checking out all Gayatri's friends. And he would be a pleasure to have around. Sometimes I used to be so deep in this daydream that I would wake up with a jolt, and I would be watching Veer meditatively stacking up his blocks one on top of the other, and I would feel a jolt of sadness, disappointment, anger, and guilt all at once. As Veer started growing older, this daydream started fading. I realized that I loved who he was. I started laughing at his antics rather than cringing at them. I remember one veteran autism mom telling me, autism is funny and you should laugh at it. And so I started learning to laugh at Veer. I started laughing when he would make exaggerated faces. I started laughing when he would make these funny noises and would say something funny. I started laughing when he started taking things literally, like for the time when I told him it's raining cats and dogs, and he ran to the window to see whether cats and dogs were actually falling from the sky. And the more I laughed, the more I came to love and accept him as he is. So that was lesson 4. When Veer and Gayatri were about 5.5 years old, I started working with other children and their families with autism at the Autism Intervention team at Umeed. Over the next 10 years, I worked with hundreds of children and their families, providing them therapy and going into their lives in the therapy room. This helped me look beyond my own challenges and really help others. I realized the true meaning of service. I realized what it is to give of myself. And I realized that I could here get a peek into so many different kinds of autistic minds. I found this really fascinating. I realized that the way that the autistic brain interprets information and perceives the world around is so different. I realized how people on the spectrum make sense of the world. And through these realizations, I came to the understanding that autism is not so much a deficit or a disorder as it is a different way of perceiving. This only deepened my understanding of Veer, and it helped me empower myself and other parents. I also realized that when you go through life, we all face extenuating circumstances. And that is when knowledge is key. It is only when we are well informed that we are able to take decisions with a cool and collective mind, leaving our emotions aside. This is something that has to be done. We can then just move forward and meet our potential, no matter what that is. That was lesson number 5. The initial years when, after Veer's diagnosis, I was running on a near empty petrol tank. I realized that I was doing everything for him. I felt like a cross between Wonder Woman and Chachi 420, taking it upon myself to solve all of Veer's burdens and problems. And what happened to me was that this petrol tank became empty and came close to crashing. This is when I realized the importance of building a village. I did not have to rely on myself to do everything for Veer, but that it was important for me to create support structures for Veer and for my family. These support structures were my family, my extended family, my friends, Veer's therapists and teachers. I realized that I had been holding this situation so close to me, and I was just not sharing the responsibilities when it came to Veer. But when I did, I felt lighter and I felt much more connected to all the people who were surrounding me. Whether it was Veer's occupational therapist who would stay extra long and answer all my questions, no matter how small and silly they would be. whether it was his shadow teacher who arranged for a musician to come and play at his birthday party because she knew that he loved music, or whether it was his special educator who not only taught Veer to read and write, but also fed him breakfast every single time that he went for class to her house. All these people were my village, and it was warm, it was friendly, and it was connected. Hillary Rodham Clinton rightly said, "It takes a village to raise a child," and this was my village. Veer benefited so much from this exposure to different people. He got the opportunity to socialize, he got the opportunity to experience different situations, different things, different people, and it gave me a chance to catch my breath and prepare for another day. Today, Veer is 16 years old. He is a handsome young man with a rakish smile. He makes me laugh every day with his antics. He has a wicked sense of humor, and he loves and teases his sister in equal measure. He has friends of all ages whom he hangs out with and whom he chats with on the phone and on WhatsApp. He doesn't play football with the other boys, but he is a master baker. Give him any recipe and he bakes the most perfect cake. As for me, I have realized that true happiness is living in the here and now. I've learned that it's not what you get in life, it's what you make of it. I've learned that your life can be perfectly imperfect and that you can still be blissfully happy. And as I take a bite of Veer's moist, delicious cake, I've realized that you can have your cake and eat it too. Thank you.